Hello and welcome to Breaking the Cycle Two Step Forward podcast, episode number 40. That's 40. I'm here, I'm Beverley Ann, and as always, joining me today is.
Hi everyone, it's Chris here.
And today our subject is about exploring sex education, which Chris, after we recorded our last episode about pornography and younger children, a couple of articles have since been released, and we thought it'd be a great time to look at these articles and explore sex education within the school, within the home, a little bit more deeper, and have a look at the context and share some of our own thoughts and try to also look at it from an objective point of view. And I think it's fair to say, for anyone who's listening and you find it's uncomfortable, please take some deep breaths, because we're going to be very honest and share with you that this is a very difficult conversation. And at times it gets uncomfortable for myself and for Chris. Is that fair to say, Chris?
100%. Yes. Lots of deep breaths and lots of, oh, do I think I want to share that? But, you know, we're trying to come at this from a place of authenticity and honesty and transparency. So sometimes what we share is even really uncomfortable for us, but we'll live with it and we'll get over it, because we are just trying to open up the conversation for everybody.
Absolutely. And where we're sharing from a level as well is we're sharing from an adult's perspective, where we want to raise awareness for prevention and safety for other young people and vulnerable people going forward. We're also sharing to support those people that are looking to find their voice and looking to heal from abusive situations that they've been in, whether it be sexual, physical, or emotional. We're also looking at it from a parental point of view, where we've got children ourselves and the challenges that presents as well, because there's one thing we want to do is keep them safe, but we also don't want our own experiences to come in and harm them. And lastly, and most importantly, from ourselves as survivors ourselves. And yes, we share certain things to enable this conversation to be opened, but we also have to do it in a way that is respectful to ourselves as well. And I think that covers quite a multitude of layers, Chris, doesn't it, in this subject?
100% what you've just covered there. But, you know, we also want to compare or highlight the insight from what is natural and normal and what is been tarred from our perspective because of the sexual abuse that we have endured as children, and how that can actually tar the actual normal and natural around this. And as we go through this podcast today, I think people will really get what we're trying to achieve with the normal, natural versus what sexual abuse does to that normal, natural, and also what pornography is doing to the normal and natural for children and young people today.
Yes, and as we spoke before, I just want to give a clear definition about pornography. Pornography is for consenting adults over the age of 18. And when I say consenting, that's all parties consenting. That's not one and not the other. It's all parties, and that is completely natural. When we bring anyone under the age of 18 into pornography, that is not considered pornography. Child pornography does not exist.
Yep, it's child sexual abuse material that is often a crime scene. It's a child or young person being raped, sodomized, tortured, sexually assaulted. So that is what, when the media refer to child porn, that is what they're referring to.
Yeah.
Child porn, as you said, Beverley, does not exist in any way, shape or form, even though that's what the media often refer to it as.
And that's part of the language we just want to have clear. And that also comes in with sharing pictures of naked children. That comes under that area as well. So we need to get that clear, and take some deep breaths, everybody listening, because it's important to get uncomfortable in the difficulty, because it's the only way we'll get through this and be able to have a balanced conversation, so that we can all negotiate what's right for us and for others around us.
So going back to the article, Children's Commissioner, pornography. So this is any type of pornography on the internet affecting 8-year-olds' behaviour. The behaviour of children as young as 8 is being affected by them viewing pornography, the Children's Commissioner for England has said. So Dame Rachel D'Souza said that children are seeing pornography on social media, and technology companies should be doing more to remove the images or videos. Schools need to improve education, and parents need to set appropriate boundaries. Now, Dame Rachel has published a report on the influence of pornography on harmful sexual behaviour among children. So we expressed in our last podcast, didn't we, about peer-on-peer sexual abuse and exploitation exploding as a thing in its own right, and what we may be and should be doing to help children navigate all of that. And this report goes on to say, at the most serious end, children were using the language of violent pornography, and it was affecting their behaviour. And she was speaking to Radio 4's Today programme about this. She said most children see porn first on Twitter and then on Snapchat, as well as accessing porn companies. She said we need decent age verification, and that the online safety bill needs to step up and make tech companies more accountable. She said if you've got a social media site that allows 13 plus on, then they should not be able to see pornography, and it's up to the tech companies to be doing more about this. And then she goes on to say how you know, these tech companies need to be doing more, and that violent porn should not even be seen by any child of any age, child or young person of any age, and that adults, parents, do not fully understand what their children are seeing, what their children are being allowed to see. That she's just saying that parents that think their children are going on to just view age appropriate material, and that's just not the case. Yeah, so very interesting that more and more reports and articles are coming out sharing the same worries and concerns, yet not enough is being done about it. But hopefully with the online bill being strengthened, it will tackle some of this damage that is being done for children and young people who are seeing this kind of violent porn, that then they are, because they're not getting the education and the awareness from school maybe, or the educational setting, or from their parents, they're internalizing that as being normal and natural, and
Yes.
It just isn't.
And this is when, as we were talking before we started recording, you know, it's a fine line in gaining that balance, isn't it? So when we look at traditional sex education at school, it has improved in some ways, but it's very much, you had the right words earlier when we were talking, and you know, it's easy to talk about the act of sex.
Mm-hmm.
And we can, most people, not everyone, but most people can age appropriately talk about the act of sex regarding who they're speaking to. So if someone was 4, I wouldn't be doing it in the same way as someone who's 12 or 14, or even someone that was 10, because there's also, we need to be aware of the average age of young people or children exploring sexual behaviour. And some of that is natural.
Yeah.
Now, this is when it gets into a whole different world with you and me,
Yeah.
because children naturally are born curious. They are
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
They are learning about how to relate to each other. So that happens naturally with, and we're going to, for today, talk about the caregivers being the parents. Okay. So any caregiver comes under the role of parental care today, and that's as far as we're going to go. But they're looking, a baby will naturally start touching a parent's face, will be looking at their expression. But that's where the touch comes from. That's where the intimacy starts to build. But we tend to shy away from that word intimacy because, especially as survivors, I know.
I've just recoiled, Bev, when you said that word.
And I felt myself doing it as well, because we had our boundaries crossed over. Mine was from a very young age. So one of my caregivers crossed that line between intimacy and boundaries.
Yeah.
So after that, for me, intimacy was something that I identified with something I need to keep myself protected from. I need to disassociate from this. It's dirty, it's horrible, or I didn't know it was dirty so much. It just felt very wrong. My stomach, I can feel right now reacting in the way it did. I can feel lots of things happening physically. Yeah, my throat, being unable to say what I was feeling because A, I was too young to know how to verbalize, and B, too young to actually know what it was I was feeling. So we need to be very aware of this, because even though I had that personal experience, I do believe we also need to be able to speak to our children, age-related, about intimacy and consent in a way that we enable our children, our young people going into adults, to first learn about their own selves and their boundaries, but then also to be able to know that they can say no. And we've spoken about consent in a different way. The reason why I'm saying this is I'm going to now read out the other article that we spoke about.
Before you do that, can we just touch upon, if there's no abuse within the family at all, and if our listeners have never come across sexual abuse and they're just listening for the first time, can we talk about what it would look like in a just normal, natural family environment?
Yes.
So a child should be able to explore their body in their own way, and most children will find some pleasure from doing that.
Absolutely. And thank you because I was going off on that trajectory.
That's because you're being a bit triggered, that's why.
And thank you for bringing me back. And this is where we're being very honest about it, because it's no good pretending that this is an easy subject for anybody. So naturally, as we started to say, intimacy is through touch. It's also through kissing, and it's also through snuggling. So as we get older as children, so when we become 4, that snuggling and that kissing is normal.
And natural between a parent and child and siblings.
And another natural part is for children to explore their own bodies, to be playing with themselves, to, when they're relaxed, when a young boy is having a story read to him, to be maybe playing with his genitalia. That's natural. But also it's about being respectful and teaching, not don't do that, it's dirty. There's the wrong message. Maybe do that another time, in your own space. In your own space, So you're not stopping people, but it's also being aware, because I had to be very aware, you had to be very aware, a lot of survivors have to be very aware that we're not protracting our own experiences onto our children. And I say intentionally, but also unintentionally.
Yeah.
Because it is very easy to want to go, don't do that. But actually, no, that's not fair to our children. But we see it in young girls as well, you know, sometimes on settees or climbing ropes, etc. They're normal experiences. Okay, we see it
Of like
with
rubbing
animals.
themselves, like
Yeah,
rubbing, because
we,
there's a little bit of exploration and pleasure that they get from it. But the boundary is, Bev, isn't it? And we need to make that clear, that that's the child exploring themselves,
yes,
and that's fine. When the line is crossed is when an adult may think, ah, okay, and then they do something to that child. That is not okay. It's never okay.
No. And there's also something that once I was told about this, you know, I'll be very honest. I was like, so pleased you warned me. And that's why I'm very much like these conversations, because when I was having my own support in my early days of recovery, you know, I was warned about my child might want to kiss me, but use the tongue. This is so normal. It's further exploration. Now, if I
Right.
hadn't have known that, I would have
Yeah.
reacted in a way that could have been detrimental. But
See,
because I
I've not
had that
heard
knowledge,
that.
yeah. So
Okay.
that's a natural extension. It's not saying that it's going to happen for every child, but some children will want to explore. They see it on
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah.
Now, it's not that we want to stop it, but it's a different way of kissing, but not necessarily kissing with your friend or your relatives.
So natural, normal, where there's no abuse in the family and all the rest of it, and no one's crossing any boundaries and stuff like that, that's fine. But you often hear, don't you, in different conversations, like, you know, if you keep playing with that, it's going to fall off. You know, people laugh it off, and that's fine. You know, that's a way of dealing with it. But also, you know, when a child is whatever age, but as they grow up, if they start then playing like games of doctors and nurses and what,
Yeah,
you know, mum and dad, and then there's some peer on peer exploration that just might be that. Yeah.
absolutely.
However, if there's a bigger age gap, maybe, and no
Or
one said, no, this is the boundary, no, you can do it on yourself, but you shouldn't be doing it with other children and all of that, then it might turn into actual peer on peer sexual abuse that is being, unfortunately, the word is, perpetrated by one child or young person on a not consenting child or young person. So it's out of the realms of exploration. As I said, this is very grey areas here, and you'll often find, and I hear it a lot, oh, it's children being children, but that should not be allowed to happen, because each child will deal with it and take from it a different perspective and a different experience.
And this is where I talk about, you know, we come back to that consent and we come back to bullying, because bullying is always when someone is using their power or their ability to manipulate someone. So if you're being bullied emotionally, physically, sexually, regardless of the age, that is wrong. I believe that if we teach our children from a young age, as we spoke about before, about consent and boundaries, and we focus on, you know, this is your body, it's your choice, we can do that in a way that allows education, that allows conversation. And when people are, you know, when children, not people, when children are exploring, they can have that conversation with someone such as their parents, you know, but enabling also the parents to feel comfortable. Because when it comes to sex education, it isn't just about what the child learns at school. It's also about parents, ourselves, you know, any parent also finding ways, finding support for themselves so that they're able to have a conversation too.
Yeah. Oh, my brain is going all over the place with this. So I keep coming back to the words natural and normal, because that's the way that my brain deals with this without triggering me into other stuff. But I can honestly say, as a survivor, and I didn't know I was a survivor when I was the first time mum and growing up and that, I didn't recognize myself as such. I just knew that I'd gone through what I'd gone through. I knew anything to do with the word sex, intimacy, made me feel ashamed, made me feel dirty. And then obviously I tried not to put that onto my children, but the fact that I could only have a perfunctory, this is how babies are made, like I spoke about the mechanics of it, egg, sperm, an act of sex happens, a baby's made, could do all of that because it's biology, that's what we learn in biology. But when it came to talk about, I could talk about feelings of love and all the rest of that, that wasn't a problem. But the fact that, you know, if I saw a child, whether it be mine or someone else, if I was around another person's house and the child would be playing with themselves, I couldn't deal with that. That made me feel, ugh, that's just a step for me too far, because it was a trigger for me. And there's going to be lots of other survivors who do become parents that find themselves in the same situation, maybe with the same, oh, what do I do with this? How do I deal with this? How do I deal with my own stuff, yet not do what we've just explained to, you know, the child that's in front of us? And you've explained it very well, actually.
That is very, very hard. And I think also for me, what helped me immensely, and I'm going to be very honest here, I worked as a carer as well, very, very many years ago, a special needs hospital. And it was young people up to the age of 18 with the average ability of an 18-month child.
Wow. Okay.
So you see what is natural and what is normal, because they are exploring themselves in a way. And I'm not saying that was never triggered, but it was a great learning for me to really see, whoa, how am I reacting to this? You know, so it's not an easy subject.
And again, touching upon all the stuff that we are discussing today, it's the same as going to medicals, whether it be a mammogram, a cervical smear, or a prostate check for a gentleman, a man. Those professionals have seen so many boobs, so many penises, so many vaginas. So to them, it's just a job and it's just another body part. But for us that have gone through something, sexually, have been abused, violated, exploited, it's a different thing. It's a different feeling. It is, I don't want you to touch me. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to do that. It's about us protecting ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that's the trauma informed practice that needs to happen with professionals, I think, and many don't have that.
No, and I want to add a caveat to that, because the other thing is, for children that haven't been abused as well, what happens in that world when they present, and we're talking particularly, say, young girls for a minute. So when a young girl is getting, say, thrush or urine infections, the next thing that happens a lot and has done traditionally is they start doing internal examinations. Now, I understand the physical reason for it, but they have been doing those internal examinations with no conversation. And that in itself is a trauma. It is, you are doing an internal examination to a young child without giving them choice or consent. You're not asking the child's consent, and that is important. We understand they can't give legal consent, understand that completely, but at least talk to them, give them time to think about this, give them support, because that to them as well is abuse.
Wow. Okay. I think we need to bring this back to the article that you're going to share with everybody now.
Yeah, but I just wanted to add that
I
caveat
know
because
there's so many layers to this, and it could
yeah,
fire off in all kinds of different
and that
topics of
yes, but
conversation.
that comes back to our, teaching our children that they have,
Yeah.
they have the freedom to explore their own body,
Yes.
but there's also boundaries, and they have permission to say what's comfortable and what's not. So that's
And
what we're looking at.
it comes
Yeah.
back to that body autonomy that we want to instill in everybody. They have
Yes.
autonomy over their own body.
Yeah.
And then they can put the boundaries in place and the consent in place to stop anything potentially harmful happening to themselves. But it's not their responsibility. We know that. We've shared that so many times before. It's the perpetrator's fault always if anything does happen. But instilling in young people, children and young people, this body autonomy and the consent will hopefully keep them safe from harm.
Yeah, and I'd like to add one other part of that. The reason for this as well is going into adulthood, because just because we can become adults does not mean to say that we learn to understand our body and the boundaries, personal boundaries. And I know the challenges of being able to say, I don't want to make love tonight, for instance. How many people, men and women, don't have those words? And I have been in that place in the past. That's not because I was being abused by someone. I just didn't know how to have that voice. So we're talking about it so we can learn here, but it very much goes into adulthood as well.
And it's really important, isn't it, to be able to say no, whatever the situation, whether you're in a loving relationship or not, to say no and have it respected, and then build that proper relationship that is a healthy relationship. Lots to think about.
Absolutely. So let's go back to this article that I'm going to read. Now, I'm very aware that we're reading, and we're going to put the links to the articles as well. So anybody watching this or listening to this who wants to read the whole of the article, you will have it. And also we want, this is to be referenced. So we want to make sure. So there's been a 68-page report, standards for sexuality education in Europe, that was first published in 2010, and campaign groups are concerned about the sexualization of very young children, and they want it banned for fear of influencing official sex education policy. Now, I find that quite interesting in that part, first of all, because we've got sex education, which personally I understand to be the act of sex.
And the biology of all of that.
And the biology. And then we've got sexuality education. Is that the same or is it separate?
So for me, it means biological sex, which is scientific and cannot be changed, in my opinion. And then there's gender. And gender is a social construct, and it's more about the smashing the gender stereotypes, not adhering to male or female stereotypes, and you picking and choosing how you feel. Does that make sense?
Clear to me. So it continues in this article, and it says the document was also cited in a report consulted by Welsh ministers, who last year introduced a mandatory sexual education syllabus to schools in Wales, although the Welsh government stressed it did not endorse the WHO guidance. And the WHO guidance is the World Health Organization guidance.
And what were they saying, the WHO, Bev?
Well, it was commenting on sexuality education. The Alliance recently warned, we find it extremely concerning that the UN and WHO are promoting an approach that is experimental, unscientific, and appears to be aligned to the work of unethical individuals and organizations, including those promoting the acceptance of paedophilia. We call upon them to revise their standards to align with a safeguarding first approach that protects children while allowing them to develop a healthy and age-appropriate understanding of sex. So what's interesting for me, before I continue, again, we've got another connotation here of the word sexuality, sexual, and sex. Okay, so it's 3 different concepts there of one word. And I pull that out because when we're reading an article that's written in a newspaper, I think it's very important to be able to look at both sides of that and really break it down. A WHO spokesman said it stands by its guidance. Our guidelines reflect established psychological facts based on decades of research. The document asserts that children embark on sexual education from birth, which is something that we mentioned earlier. It reads, from birth, babies learn the value and pleasure of bodily contact, warmth, and intimacy. Soon after that, they learn what is clean and what is dirty. Adding, in other words, they are engaging in sexuality education. The government spokesman said the government does not recognise this WHO guidance and we don't agree with its recommendations. We have not distributed or promoted it to schools. We offer our own guidance to help schools to teach children and young people about relationships and health. And it says the article has been amended to make clear that a WHO report was cited in a document consulted by Welsh ministers rather than consulted directly by the ministers. So the actual WHO report, I think, would be very important to look at, and we'll put that link in. But from what,
yeah.
sorry.
So what the WHO was sort of like, or what's been shared on social media, is that a video that the WHO had put together, and it was a professional talking to a young child about masturbation and self-pleasuring. And that to me was a massive no-no for me personally. And it's reflected by many other people, parents and other people within society, that don't agree with that detailed kind of education and awareness for such young children, age 3 and 4.
And this is what we always talk about, age appropriate. And also safeguarding.
Yeah, so for me, what that video flagged up was that a professional was speaking to a 3 or 4-year-old about their body parts. Haven't got a problem with that, okay, but age appropriate. But also about masturbation. What's to stop any professional, if they got the go-ahead, the green light, any professional giving that child that education and then overstepping the boundary, and then child sexual abuse happening, child sexual exploitation happening? It is just, where is the safeguarding in all of this?
So the one-on-one, and for me, without seeing the video, and I'm going to say I haven't seen the video, for me, that 3-year-old or 4-year-old being on a video that's being circulated.
Yeah.
Where's their consent and their safety?
And I wrote on a comment against this video, and I just said, like, perpetrators that are perpetrators, they're sexual offenders, the ones that are already doing it, thinking about it, and are going to do it. Can you imagine them walking into a room where an act that is natural, normal for children to be doing, and they're like, and this is the thinking that these people have that are perpetrators. Oh, she's turning me on, he's turning me on, okay? And then just victim blaming the child for then the crimes that they're committing. And people might think, oh my God, Chris, you're just going like
That's
off
what
the charts now
happens.
with that. But this is what actually happens. Oh, she was wearing a short skirt. Oh, she was dancing provocatively in front of me. This is what the perpetrators actually say. That is why they committed their crime, okay? So can you imagine all of these children nationwide, if this ever took off, nationwide, having this education and having this awareness, thinking that they're going to be safe to do it within their home environment or whatever extended family environment, and then these perpetrators going, it's like almost an open door policy for them to just do what they want to do.
And this is where the one-on-one for me, and I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you because I hear you and I'm acknowledging that.
Yeah.
The one-on-one for me is the red flag, the huge red flag. Doing it in a group so that there is safeguarding is fundamental.
They're just too young.
Yes, but there's also finding a language, and I do believe, as scary as it is, we find a language and a way of speaking that, as in that it's okay to open a conversation so that they can ask questions. So like I said, if you're reading to a child that's playing with themselves and you're reading a book to them, they're playing themselves, that for me is a trigger. However, maybe not now, later on when you're in bed. So you're not stopping, you're enabling, but you're making it age related.
And you're just allowing that child to do natural and normal things
and learn,
but by yourself, in your safe environment, your own body autonomy, your own consent, in your own safe space, not in front of anybody else, and no one else is allowed to get involved because that's outside of the boundary.
And you might not say all of that all in the same time.
No, but I want to get it across clear to everybody listening.
And I'm sure we've got people listening that have got loads they want to say. So I'm very aware of time. So
bring it on.
Yeah, please do, because one thing we would like is for you to feed back, and you can feed back your thoughts, any questions, anything further that you'd like us to explore. You can contact us in several different ways. BreakingTheCycleToStepForward@gmail.com. That's our email address. We have a Facebook page, Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward. We're also on Instagram, and you can find us through both of our own websites, which is Survivors of Abuse, SOB, which is a charity that Chris is a founder of, or the Step Forward Practice, where you'll see me as well. So there's lots of different ways. You can find us through YouTube, you can find us on most podcast platforms, and you can find us on Mintwave Radio. So there's lots of different ways. No, you can follow us and contact us through most of the apps as well. So please feedback to us. We do respect that other people have different opinions, and we want to hear them. We do appreciate them coming through in a respectful way, though. We are human beings, and we are just trying to open a conversation that we appreciate is very challenging. It's uncomfortable. We've been very honest in us sharing that it's uncomfortable. And you know what? It's important that we have this, because unless we find a way to open this conversation, how are we ever going to expect our children to have that acknowledgement of themselves and to learn what is right for them and to be able to voice it?
And you know what, Bev, what I would really love is a professional in sex education or sexual relationships, whatever they're an expert in, to come on and maybe challenge some of what we've said, so that we can really have a really in-depth conversation, but they will bring the in-depth knowledge and the history and whatever, and then we can just go, well, okay, let's unpick all of this. We hear you, but this is our side, from our personal perspectives, from being survivors and being parents.
And in that sexual educator, it would be good if it's a sexual educator of children from different ages, people that are on the front line, who are in their place, so we can hear their thoughts. Because also, who in the schools is educating the children and also educating the parents? Because I do believe it has to be full circle.
and I'd never ever got invited to any of the schools that my kids went to for a parent education, sex education, and what should be spoken about, and maybe what shouldn't, and what was age appropriate. Never ever had that. Did you?
Well, I did, because I made myself busy. So
okay.
also I was an ambassador for a young out of school charity in Bromley. So I knew about, for instance, that there's a C card that young adults have access to condoms, etc., within schools, out of schools, and very much about the pill and things like that of being available to young people. But some of that comes from my own experience from being in care anyway, so I had access to it, so I wanted to find out what was happening. So I'm not going to embarrass the child, but one of my children and some of their friends have asked me some questions, you know, where can we access this, or my girlfriend's in trouble, what can we do? Do you see what I mean? So yeah, no, I made myself, I chose to be informed, let's just put it like that. So I asked the questions to enable as much as I could. Someone's knocking at the door, it's time to go. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you another time. Bye-bye.